I'm Spencer Hodgetts, founder of Reboundog, and I'm super excited to welcome as our guest Deborah Hamilton, Principal of Hamilton Law and Mediation, calling in from the eastern seaboard of the United States. Hi Deborah, so pleased to see you. Thank you for your patience.
It's great.
What I
Chatting with you.
When we were talking about this idea for today's topic, and you talked about weeding the garden, my brain just went, wow. As an ex-professional horticulturalist for a quarter of a century, I thought, I get this. It makes absolute sense as an analogy of how you address conflict as weeding the garden. Because I just went, great, pruning, fertilizing, etc., etc. Tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you for having me. I love Reboundog, and I'm so glad to be here. I'm an attorney who has really dedicated their last 10 years or 13 years of their practice to be a conflict consultant, a conflict coach, and a mediator of conflicts between people over animals. Because going into court when you have a conflict over an animal, whether it's in divorce, landlord-tenant, contracts, vet malpractice, it's such an emotional conflict that to be able to sit down in mediation or to be able to be coached to be not as reactive and defensive will help all the parties find a resolution. So I apologize for the bright sunlight behind me. It'll be down soon. I am traveling up to to New Jersey for the National Dog Show Therapy Dog Symposium. I've been on the board of directors of that group for a while, so I've given some talks about how to have conversations and weed the garden in therapy dog exposure from both the facility who has the therapy dogs and the therapy dogs who go in. So I'm so glad to be here, Spencer.
It's a pleasure. You talked earlier, we're looking at if you run this as a workshop, you take it through 4 stages. And I recall that, and if you're looking at how you start to tidy, from my background, how do you tidy your garden up? Well, my obvious, you go and start to prune things. You take out the unnecessary. So in your case, I believe you're looking at pruning out inefficiencies. Can you explain a bit more?
Absolutely. But you have to be careful, as you know, when you're pruning, not to cut the valuable roots and the valuable, stems that are going to bloom next year. So when you're pruning, it's not scorched earth. It's more the ability to look at and evaluate the staff you have, the clients you have, and keep the ones who you think simply need some nurturing so that they can bloom next season, rather than just having, an all-out pruning party. I often say to colleagues of mine who want to fire the toxic personalities, if you don't do any self-examination, and Spencer, you and I have talked about this, if you don't do self-examination as well as examination of your staff or the people you're working with, then you're just going to take yourself with you and you're going to hire the same people. So when you're weeding the garden and you're pruning for maximum harvest next month, next quarter, next year, you have to really take the time to do it thoughtfully, and to, as the second piece says, you need to fertilize so that you make sure that once you prune, you also fertilize.
Yeah, I find that because part of my training was in botanical gardens, so that it wasn't just a case of hack and slash as pruning, so you cut everything out with my hands. It was actually being selective. So you're pruning, like for second year wood, certain flowers flower on second year wood, and some flower, and you learn the botanical differences. And it's the same with people relationships. You learn what works, and people, I think people, we had this this call, it's the big stopping gap, I think, is ego. People have too much ego attached to their attitudes, to their relationships with animals. So it must get quite stressful, I would have thought, when it gets to a court situation. There's a litigation starts to push its way slightly. So how do you address that when?
Well, I don't litigate anymore because of that. The laws can only do so much to help people resolve conflicts over animals because animals are property, not to you and not to me, but in
Mhm.
the courts, they are property. They may have a little bit more standing than they did, say, 20 years ago, but they're still property. And for me, being able to either hire a conflict consultant to help you better handle your reactivity and your defensiveness when you're speaking to someone you're angry with over whatever happened with your pet or whatever they're claiming you did to their pet, um, makes the conversation so much more fruitful than if, in fact, you just go to court and have an attorney stand up and spout the law and why you should win. I mean, I have a colleague right now who's writing all sorts of replevin things in court for a client of mine, and I said, well, um, maybe you want to recognize that the judge needs to know the story. And so do both the clients, again, need to know the story, as opposed to simply just stating the law. Because if you state the law, then often preconceived ideas and notions will come in and they might shut down the possibility for a better resolution. So for me, I always like to start with a collaborative conversation, possibly mediation or conflict consulting, so that at least one party in the discussion has the ability to stop, breathe, actively listen, and wait to answer. I often say to people who are in conflict over animals, you know, you don't have to answer right away, right? And they go, no, no, I have to. And I go, no, take all the information in and give both of you time to rethink what it is you said and then move forward.
So it's a reflective process where both parties are reflecting over a period of time on what the other one said.
If they have the ability to do that, you know that, Spencer, because sometimes they are so angry and their egos are so fragile that they need to be right over getting it right for the animal. And what we do here at Rebound and talk about all the time is how do we help the people focus on what's best for the animal going forward, not necessarily what we always do or what we think is best for the animal. Let's look at all the situations that might come up for the animal that would make having a collaborative outcome be better for the animal. Maybe not initially great for the people, yet if the animal is thriving, then that's all that we're hoping for.
Because surely that's both sides, say your clients, both sides actually think that they want, or deep down that they want. I guess it comes down to like a lot of things with animal welfare and relationships, is this lack of education of how we relate to the animal, and then it becomes a case of what's necessary so the outcome that you achieve through your conflict and your resolution and mediation work actually achieves that best result. We're coming back to what you said just now, Deborah, where you're talking about a story where if an attorney goes into court and just slams the law down and says 1, 2, 3, that's it, done, that cannot apply. It can become a framework, which is what legislation surely is meant to do, is a framework to build on, but it can't fulfill every single case, because every single case, as in human conflict, is different.
And I really wish most people who want to sue, they just get so frustrated. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody's listening to me. Because in an adversarial interaction, no, nobody listens to you except your attorney. The only one who listens to you is your attorney. The other side's just going to be thinking about how to tell you you're wrong. The mediation, or if you have the assistance of a conflict consultant, you're able to take the information in, ask curious questions, and stop the adversarial defensive interaction, the ego poking, and really simply say, we're here to really find out what would be the next best steps for all of us and this animal going forward. It really is what needs to be done, and what needs to happen is everyone needs to be able to actively listen, fully um, understand if they're using a little hyperbole that really doesn't reflect what occurred, but because they're so upset, it's what's become part of their discussion of the
Mm.
matter, and recognize that most of the time they have two or three things that they agree on that never get addressed in a litigation. They always focus on what we disagree on. But in conflict consultations, when I'm talking to people, I always say, well, let's think about what it is that's working here, because they never go back and do that. And then they calm down and they go, oh, well, I didn't even remember that, they called me, or I didn't even remember they said they wanted to give me a full refund, or I didn't even, but they called me at the wrong time. And I said, I get it. And that's really frustrating. And what can we do to recognize that, yeah, they didn't call when I asked them to call or on the number I told them to call, but they called. And that sometimes takes them aback a little because they didn't give the other party credit for calling. They, you know, negated the call by saying they didn't call at the right time or on the right number. And, these little things can escalate conflicts over animals in a huge way. You know that from your work because you focus on the thing that annoys you rather than the thing that you can think about that may actually work toward helping you find, as Bill Urey would say, the third side, the part of the discussion that could come to, oh, wow, I never even thought we could do that.
So do you then find that it helps, does it speed up the resolution of these conflicts?
When you are able to help people actively listen and you fertilize their, it's the amygdala versus the prefrontal cortex.
Mm-hmm.
If you can help them breathe so that they don't immediately go into their amygdala and they can actually get themselves back into their prefrontal cortex, that executive functioning ability, if they can actually separate out what triggers them from what they can work with, then you can create that atmosphere in which resolutions can be found. But if you can't have, if they are constantly going into their amygdala, their fight, flight, fear, fawn, it's almost impossible. And that's why either in mediation, where someone can absolutely hold a safe space for you, or hiring a conflict consultant if the other party won't participate in mediation, so that you yourself can take the heat out of the discussion by appreciating and acknowledging how Spencer feels. That doesn't mean you agree with them. You're just going to say, well, what I hear you say, Spencer, is that, what I did to the dog was, unconscionable, and the dog suffered because of it. And I want to really say that I can see how you feel that way. Period. Don't say, but I didn't mean it, or but that wasn't my intention, or but. That three-letter word, you and I have both talked about that, Spencer. That word negates every positive thing you've said before but.
It puts a full stop on it, doesn't it? It stalls the conversation, any progress that can be made. So do you find, looking at the other sides of your work, you talked about pruning inefficiencies, and obviously
and fertilizing, right?
And fertilizing. So with fertilizing client relationships, how do you expand on that to move it a stage forward into the next step of fertilizing client relationships?
Well, you have to do that cursed thing. You have to ask for feedback, right? You have to ask for how was your experience with us today, if you're in business, or how was that meeting for you today, or what could we all do better to have a better meeting at the end of the meeting, instead of just saying, okay, great meeting, and walking out. Take 5 minutes at the end of the meeting and say, so today's meeting, I think went really well. Let's go around the room and ask everyone what they felt went really well and what they think we can work on.
So you're doing what I used to have a trade union background as European global board level, and again it's that situation, you're looking at taking the holistic view of the room rather than taking the singular opinion maybe of the global CEO or the president of the union or whatever. So, and it's allowing everybody to have their voice heard equally. And also it's looking at how in that sort of situation, and it's similar to the work you're doing, it's one person who's going to be more vocal than the other, and the person who's quiet has just their opinion is just as valuable to this conversation and trying to address this conflict.
And it sometimes can be very difficult for the quiet ones to speak up because they might not feel comfortable, they might not feel safe,
Yeah.
they might not feel that anyone wants to hear what they have to say. So not only do you do it in an in-person, informal, welcoming way in the room at the end of the meeting, but you also say, I really would love everyone to give me, 3 sentences on what went well, what didn't go well in this meeting, by the end of the week, so that we all have a chance, because maybe they can say in a less public forum what they think, and you might get great feedback. But that goes to fertilizing both the organization and the person to feel empowered and have agency to really let you know what it is that's working, what isn't working. And I mean, I know a lot of people who might be on this call might be saying, then the squeaky wheels always talk all the time and drives you nuts. Well, yes, and that does happen. Yet, if it happens organically, you can always enable everyone to say, well, 5 people will give us their opinion today, and then the rest, please give it to me by email. So that if someone tends to take over, you don't have that problem.
Yeah, because the other thing I'm thinking of is there's a case where the conflict there's a scenario of bullying could be, and it could be just psychological bullying of 2 people in the room, and one has been the aggressor and one has been the person who's been bullied. Whether it's
right.
It doesn't have to be physical. It could be psychological bullying, which is, and it's how you allow the person who is the victim of that to actually contribute to this conversation. So it does become that mediation of the 2 things. I think it's brilliant what you're doing. So do you take?
Well, it simply creates that outside thought pattern, right? Because
Yes.
you're not offended by weeding the garden.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely brilliant way of what you've done. You've taken what I call law into something that creates a resolution, but actually taking it sideways, outside, whatever, however you want to look at it, and look at it from the other side. And you talked about conversation things, and a lot of the work I do is on constructive conversations, and a lot of it is about listening. It really is. It's this peripheral listening. So you're listening from out here, and again, when you're in the room as a mediator, I guess you're listening for the subtle bits that nobody else hears, and the body language and so forth, and how they respond, and how I talked about bullying and psychological bullying, is how they react to the other person's comment. I guess you're probably like me. I know you are like me, because we keep bouncing off the idea that we're alter egos, but it's how you observe that conversation, their reaction to somebody's conversation, which is where litigation doesn't work per se.
No, because they don't really recognize the emotional toll that it might be taking, or bring to the top of mind for both parties how people are reacting to what they're saying. Well, Spencer, it looks like that really upset you when Deborah said that. Tell me a little bit more about why it upset you. So you can delve deeply or more deeply into why they feel or are triggered by what the party said. And that way the other party can, God, I didn't mean it that way. I meant it this way. I didn't know that. I had a girl stand up at a vet conference once and say, I had an older woman who was talking while I was trying to hear the cat's heart, so I held my finger up to tell her to be quiet while I was listening to her heart. And she wanted to get me fired because I was the most disrespectful person, because her mother used to do that to her when she was a child. Now, how would you know that would trigger someone so in depth, right? To want to have you fired because you were disrespectful. And the young vet, she said it was her first year out of school. And she said, it just created this fear that, like, now I never hold up my finger. I never do anything like that because I don't want to maybe trip on that again. However, it's almost impossible, Spencer, for me not to say something that might trigger you, because we all say things that can trigger each other. It's whether or not you have the ability to say, you know, Deborah, when you say things like that, this is what happens for me. But if you have someone in the room as a meeting or a coach, and you express to the conflict coach, well, when Deborah says this is what happens, and the conflict coach asks you, well, how can you reframe that so that you can at least let Deborah know that when she says that, it triggers you, or that you don't let it trigger you. It's that, you know, curious question that enables someone to recognize how they're reacting, which the old can control, right, Spencer? You and I talk about this all the time. I'd love to control you, Spencer, and everything I tell you to do. Not going to happen. But I can control how I react to what it is you're doing.
Yep. But you talked about curious. It's also this fact that you and I create a space of trust. So we become
an agency.
What you call an agency, and it's that trust is such a key word in becoming the safe place, the safe space, to actually enable this curious and what you labeled as curious.
You can't be a bully and ask people for their opinions. It just doesn't work.
No, because it's too. They shut up. They freeze. You can see my hand. They just freeze. They don't want to. You have to work out how you can engage them in the conversation. So they do feel as if it's a trusted space, and you're a trusted person as a mediator to actually listen, and you're not going to tell them off and not going to react.
And if you're a boss, you need to be sure that when you ask for this kind of feedback, creates the ability to know that the person you're telling is going to appreciate and acknowledge your point of view, not just dismiss it out of hand, because that'll shut you down as well. And so, you know, when you're fertilizing, asking for input, you have to recognize that you must appreciate, acknowledge, and do something further to appreciate someone's suggestion. It may not work right now, but that doesn't mean it won't work 6 months from now.
Yeah, because the follow-up doesn't have to be today, tomorrow, but it has to be recorded, observed. Maybe if it's in a business situation, employee situation, it's recorded so it can be acted on. And then when that similar situation happens again, the employer, the boss, can deal with it in a different way, and it involve that employee, which brings on this thing of cross-pollinating, your topic of cross-pollinating team skills. It's how you bring the team together. So
that's how you make the hybrid, right? The cross-pollination is how you make the hybrid. You make everybody better.
Yes. Yeah, because we can't do it with a single gene.
We can't all hold our skills close to the vest if we're going to succeed. We all need to appreciate, acknowledge everyone's magnificence, as I always say, and enhance their magnificence by working together. Somebody's falling behind or somebody's not there or whatever, instead of getting angry, pick up the slack. And when something happens and you need assistance, hopefully will rise to the occasion as well. And if they don't rise to the occasion, then having a conversation during an office meeting about meeting the needs. Nothing is a person's job. This is a unit. If you're going to cross-pollinate, I'm going to be able to do what you do. You're going to be able to do what I do. I don't think that anyone should be the sole proprietor of X, Y, or Z, because getting hit by a bus happens. And then what happens to the business? So it's always good to cross-pollinate, to share, because beside the fact that you're dropping the ball if someone gets injured, you also are creating the ability to look at it differently and possibly create a better way to build a mousetrap.
Yeah, because in which case, if you're the boss, it's a case of asking questions and asking for the impact, but not just asking for the impact and then going. The way it goes wrong is when the boss asks for the input and then goes and takes it as his or her own idea and sells out. So it's actually involving the employee in that decision-making process and giving them ownership of that task, that department, whatever, whether it's in a veterinarian practice or whether it's in law practice. It's actually allowing people to grow within that business, and it creates a far better culture by doing so than just
in a shelter, in rescue, everywhere. Everywhere where animals are, you really need a collaborative approach to care, because on any given day, something's going to go wrong and people are going to have to stop. I remember speaking to an entire group of volunteers and workers at a shelter in Fort Worth, Texas, and they never spoke to each other. It was like they were all siloed in the same building, and they all held the story about what the other ones were doing, and they never really checked in. And we did a big circle and we all talked about what we did and how we did it, and most of the time the other party said, I didn't know you did that. Oh, I didn't know. Oh my God, you do that. And just that, without fertilization and without cross-pollination, without agency and without trust, you cannot really have a garden that's going to flourish.
No, because it's a symbiotic relationship.
And then those don't flourish. So why are we here, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a crazy world. So the fourth part you were talking about is harvesting profits. So if you've taken this through from pruning through to fertilizing and then to cross-pollinating, how do you bring the harvesting the profits into all this scenario, Deborah?
Well, there is less negative energy. So when people come in if it's a rescue or a shelter, if people come in, they feel the good there, and the pets that are there are treated in a way that have them show their best side, right? They're not struggling with the negativity in the air. I'm a big believer in the energy you put into the universe is the energy you get out. And for most shelters, rescues, veterinary practices, there's a lot of angst, and there's a lot of comparison and scorekeeping, and that really doesn't help the pet. So we need to all row the boat in the same direction. We all need to put the oars in the water. Somebody may not be putting the oar in the water as much as I'm water, but as long as we're making progress, and as long as we recognize that our mission is to keep animals safe and well cared for, and the communication between the people and the animals, about the animals, collaborative and less defensive and reactive, then people will come. There are so many vet practices that have doubled and tripled their income because they've created this ability for agency on the part of their staff, so that clients feel as if they're part of the team. I gave a program last year for creating clients as part of your team. And I had 6 people in a room that held 100, because it seems that a lot of veterinary practices, and even a lot of shelters and rescues, really don't like to either want to adopt the pet, have their preconceived biases and notions, or the pets. And I always say I don't know if they have this commercial around the world, but in the United States, they have a commercial where golden retrievers are driving a Subaru. It's a great ad for Subaru. For those are the only dogs in the world who could probably drive themselves, veterinarians. So unless you have dogs who own Subarus and drive Subarus in your practice or in your shelter, you're going to have to talk to a person. And if you don't include them and have some transparency and inclusivity for clients, then you're not going to get the best husbandry from them for their pets, which of course then will drive your income down. But if you have a really good communication system, transparency. You make them aware of Danny Rabwin has shared decision making as part of her main thrust of her teaching. She's a veterinarian who does, I think it's relief vet, but she's a mentor for veterinarians, and she has this shared decision making. Most veterinarians are afraid to allow shared decision making from being considered because, well, I just don't know how to do it. I don't know how to tell them about the gold plan, the silver plan, the bronze plan, without making them feel bad about it. And it's an art, but the shared decision making has to be where everyone feels they're doing what's best for them and what's best for the pet.
It seems that what you've just been saying is we seem to have been created shelters and veterinarian practices and similar from old industrial business models where it's very much hierarchical, CEO-led, do it my way and so forth. And I think there's definitely in this century, in the way we're talking and what we're seeing in our work, is there's an opportunity for veterinarian practices, animal shelters, rescues to actually consider an alternative way of doing business, of relating to their clients, relating to their staff, relating to their suppliers, the whole shebang. And where there's more inclusivity in the decision making. And we've seen it in business coaching where it's actually led to higher, in the case of veterinarian practice, it can lead to higher profits. It enables them to attract and retain staff, which is a huge problem I believe in the veterinarian sector. It allows them to have, we talked earlier about litigation. I think it's more so in the United States than it's in the UK. There's this issue of litigation against the veterinarian practice, and I believe that a lot of that comes from a lack of conversations that the veterinarian practice has with the customers. So if the customer is more involved, again it comes back to being able to harvesting the profits. And profits aren't always about dollars and pounds on the end of the table. It's about the profits are actually the success of the business. And why do you want to go? Why do you want to use that shelter? Why do you want to use that veterinarian practice? And it doesn't need them to do a lot. They don't need to sell a lot of more stuff, for want of instance, but they can actually attract and retain those clients. And it's far
It's
easier.
the know, like, and trust.
It is.
It's know, like, and trust.
It is.
It's know, like, and trust. Because if I am always handling you to buy this and this and this, which your dog may or may not need, then people get tired of that. But if you have a conversation, curious questions, you offer some solutions that may or may not work. No one gets angry with someone if they try a solution and it doesn't work. They get angry if they suggest a solution for something the dog never even needed.
Yeah, we have. This is live, but we have an elderly miniature Yorkie that's probably 15, 16 years old, and she has things that are wrong with her. We haven't had all the surgery done because it's not necessary to know what the prognosis. This is what the senior vet has. We had a conversation with him. He said, "Well, actually, Spence, you don't actually need to know what's wrong with her inside. If you want, you can do two things. You can do the obvious, which will happen one day, or you can try these tablets, and they work." And I think we're on the fourth repeat, but it's that trust we've established with John to say, yes, I trust your recommendation. You've done the blood test, but you're not going to say, oh yes, we need to do mega expensive operations. Who does it benefit? It doesn't benefit the dog at the end of the day, but she's not to gain from being opened up and looking at all surgeries and taking masses out and things, and it's not going to change. But it's that conversation we had. So I treat them a bit like family. It's a bit daft way of saying it, but it's that relationship. I have that trust, and I walk in, I know what if I walk in and say, oh, Sweet Pea's got this, or Jem's got that, I take their opinion, Because it's not, oh, you're trying to sell me this next expensive thing, or you're trying to put me on this horrendous pet plan insurance or whatever, insurance, so you can make a commission out of it. And that's the difference. Would we move vets? No. Have we been with them for 8 years? Yes. And would stay with them and recommend them for that reason. Yeah. And that's the difference. And that's a real life.
It's the know, like, and trust.
Yeah,
that's the best part of the garden is the fertilization that creates that know, like, and trust.
Yeah, because I had a situation where Sweet Pea's due for repeat medicines next week. I happened to be passing that town last week. I said, can I come and pick him up early? Yeah, sure, pick him up early. Yeah, they take my judgment. I know she's still got quality of life, so they're happy to take my opinion as well. It's not, oh, come back in for another consultation.
It's a work in progress. I think in that vein, quite frankly, here in the United States is really the only place I can talk with some sense of knowledge. The attorneys have scared the veterinarians so much about being sued that the veterinarians are very cautious, right? Yes. So they're a little afraid to maybe let the dog go home early, because if something happens, why did you let me take the dog home early? However, as you said, it's a conversation you have to have. Listen, I would prefer that the dog stay here, but if you feel comfortable doing A, B, and C, then, here's my home number, call me. Nobody's ever going to do that anymore. They used to do it when you and I were younger. Spencer, they don't do that anymore. They tell you to go to the emergency clinic. So right there, that's a little bit of a, oh my God, do I want to have to go to the emergency clinic to a stranger if I take the dog home? That's going to be something I'm going to consider. And in the United States, the attorneys who defend veterinarians who go to vet schools to tell them about how to handle difficult clients or difficult situations don't really teach the veterinarians how to have a listening conversation. They either tell them, don't say anything and call us, worst idea in the world, or, make sure you tell them you did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong here, which of course is not what the client wants to hear, because if the dog is dead, something went wrong. And, when I give the class, I always say, the best thing to say is, none of us wanted this to turn out this way. We went into this with all the hope and desired for a positive outcome that we could. And this occurred. And let's talk about what it is that happened that may in fact have exacerbated the chances for a positive outcome.
But it comes back to this key word of education. And you said about where the vets go to vet school and the attorneys say this and this is how it's bad education.
It's about education, and it's about so there's a group here that Dr. Marty Becker started calling Fear Free. And I always say to him, you have to do fear-free pet ownership as well. I said, because pet owners are reactive. If something happens to their pet, they are not going to be calm and say, oh, okay, Dr. Smith, I guess, that was fine. And no, they're going to be reactive. It has to be set up beforehand, which a lot of veterinarians don't do. This is what we hope for is the outcome. And these are some of the outcomes that might happen if complications arise. Nobody ever says that. And I mean, I had a vet who I love to pieces, but she would tell someone, cruciate surgery is easy. They come home, you keep them in a crate for 8 weeks, and they heal, and you're great. And I said to her, it is so much more than that. I mean, the first 24 hours after cruciate surgery, the dog is pretty much anesthetized, and so there's no worry. But after that, they want to get out of that crate, especially if they've never been in a crate. So they're going to be vocalizing and they're going to be having an issue. And most owners think crates are cruel. And so they're not going to keep them in the crate. And you have to really have a long conversation with your client about, if you're going to spend $1,500 on a cruciate surgery, then you have to spend the time and effort and understand the amount of time and effort it will take to rehabilitate. It's sort of like having your knee replaced, right? So you don't get up and dance the next day. You have physical therapy, you have to, stay off of it. And unfortunately, we have yet to be able to tell a dog they have to stay off their cruciate replaced knee. we can't do it, and they don't do it, and then they hurt themselves, and then the client gets mad, and the vet gets mad that the client didn't keep it quiet. I don't know how many cases I've had like that. And I said, did you take the time to sit them down and say, well, no, but I told them the dog had to be crated. I said, I get it. I get it. And they do the best they can. However, you really have to be totally transparent about the ramifications of not keeping the dog in the crate. So those are the kind of things that you need to have a relationship with your veterinarian that enables them to feel comfortable telling you the pros and the cons of surgery, and then have you make the decision. And everybody hopes for the best. Nobody goes into surgery hoping the animal will not come out in a better state. However, you really need to know everything that could happen, even with the young dog.
Yeah, we've been there years ago with a Pekingese cross Tibetan Spaniel that had a cruciate replacement, and that was weeks of therapy. And I remember we had I'm sure you used to breed Dachshunds, so we had a shaded red pure pedigree, and his disc didn't slip, it just disintegrated inside. So Deb phones me up one day and says, oh, Doug, I can't walk. And it's literally frozen. Right, into the vet. Same vet I've just been talking about. We had three options. One was to leave him here, end of. Two, you could take him home and hope for the best. Or three, there's a surgeon that comes from referrals that's 40 mile away. In the car, 40 mile down the motorway, middle of the winter, middle of the night. And the surgeon goes, yeah, I can probably fix that. Or something along those lines. 10 o'clock at night, he phones me up, I've sorted it. Yeah, he was in there, Tarka must have been there, I think it was 10 days or something, because he wasn't peeing after the surgery, he wasn't peeing. Right. So he stayed there, fell in love with the vet nurses, thinking we'd forgotten who we were, so we took him home. I've now forgotten how many weeks of physiotherapy Deb gave him, because he came home and he had him on a bungee grip with his long back to hold him, like a harness thing, pulling him up and down. He had these little rubber booties on that wouldn't go on, so he's dragging his claws underneath, so his back claws is going like that. So and I think she got him to 95% walking. And again, later on in life, when he got the cancer, we went in and I took him in one day, and the young vet says, okay, we'll leave him here and come back at 4:30 and make a decision. Tarka's bouncing around on the table, and the vet's, no, I'm not doing anything, you can take him home. 7 weeks later, decided he didn't like life anymore, so he went back in again. But it's that relationship and it's that trust. But it's knowing, they gave the referral, they gave me three options with him with his back. Leave him here, end of. Take him home, and maybe you have an invalided dog for the rest of your life, maybe on wheels, or I can recommend this surgeon. So he recommended the surgeon, so we went down that route. But it's having that was the conversations that we get with the practice that we use, that I'm guessing, I know, doesn't exist in a lot of practices.
It's a conversation you have to feel comfortable having with your client. And if you haven't built that relationship on the little things like heartworm and flea guard and, dental checkups and things like that, when the big things come, you don't have that depth of relationship like you have with your vet, that if they say, listen, you have three options and one of them is drive 40 miles down the road, then you can say, well, okay, let me just do that and see what that's going to be. And maybe that guy would have quoted a price that would have been astronomical to you. Mm-hmm. And you would have said, well, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I knew what the option was. I wish I had the $10,000 to do the surgery, but I don't. And it's okay. I mean, I know that we all think veterinary medicine is so expensive, and it is. But imagine, Spencer, 10 or 15 years ago, if our dachshunds had had an issue, maybe longer than that now because they've been doing such great things with dachshund backs, they wouldn't have been able to fix them. So the benefit of having the ability to fix them is fabulous. The cost of having to fix them is sometimes prohibitive, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay that you can't put yourself, and this is the big thing I have with the credit cards that they have here in the United States, where you can get yourself into horrendous debt because you're going to purchase with your heart. And I don't think any dog should ever be put to sleep if you can save them. Yet you really can't put yourself in bankruptcy because your dog loves you and wants you to stay safe and well mm-hmm. and happy and live for today. And if you give them the best day of their life, they're not going to hold it against you if you let them go. I mean, they're just not. We will hold it against ourselves and be guilty.
Correct.
However, we need to be able to pay our rent. We need to be able to have medical care for ourselves and our families. It stinks. It does, and there's no good answer. Insurance is very expensive. You can start an annuity that may pay for all of your dog care down the road if you put $50 in every week or whatever it
Hmm.
is. There are ways to do it. However, will we do it? Are we disciplined enough? Are we not going to take it out for the new transmission you need in the car? I don't know. So those are the things that we all have to struggle with when we own pets.
And I remember going back to the Jackson scenario. We were offered a second referral clinic in the opposite direction who did an MRI scan. I think the price was twice the price just having an MRI scan. The MRI wouldn't have proved anything that we didn't know already. But it was that option that we're
Exactly.
given. Yeah, it's given that ability, but it is tough. This cost with pets
Benefit analysis. It's really hard.
it is hard. It
Yep.
has.
Yep.
I think what you're doing in this mediation work is awesome. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn of your services?
Well, I appreciate it because, fighting over the pets don't really keep you focused on what's in the best interest of the pet, which is why I started my practice to help at least one of the parties be able to be present in the conversation and maybe bring the other one along because
Hmm.
they're actively listening, or to mediate. It's not just about divorce. It's not just about, say, landlord-tenant or vet malpractice. It's anywhere that there's pet services, there are conflicts that arise, and I can help you have that conversation. So you can get in touch with me by going to hamiltonlawandmediation.com. I also have a podcast, Why Do Pets Matter, which you've been on, Spencer, and
I
you'll be
have.
on again, I'm sure.
Yes.
So you can listen to some of the veterinarians, the lawyers, the pet service providers who've been on, who talk about how they care so much for animals, why pets matter to them, issues that have arisen for them, and how they've worked them out or didn't work them out. Um, it's it's about realizing that you might need help to have a conversation that's as emotional as the conversation over an animal, and that's what I'm there to help people do.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. I really do. I think
Thank you.
we'll put your details up on the website and everywhere else we share this podcast, this conversation.
I appreciate it.
No, I do. We should talk again soon sometime, and I've got a few other ideas in the offing. We will talk to you again
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much for your time and your patience of sitting in your car somewhere on the eastern seaboard on the way to New Jersey.
And all of you putting up with the sun, everywhere. My apologies.
I'm jealous because it's hit in the northwest of the UK. It's freezing and it's foggy and it's horrible and it's dark. And I just want to come up.
The beautiful sunlight here, as you can see.
Yeah, there's a big difference. I shall let you go and continue your journey up to New Jersey. Enjoy your conference on therapy dogs.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon.